Okay, first question of the day. How do you make old French fries? Carter.
You fry them.
Yeah, with what? Ancient Greece. Oh, what the heck? I had the answer up there. So anyway, that's what we're going to talk about, and I want to kind of put this, recontextualize some of this. We did cave art, and we did Mesopotamian art, Egyptian art, Aegean art, and kind of the way the textbook is set up is kind of, it brings you kind of a geographical flow. It goes from Egypt, which is in North Africa, and it goes up to the Aegean Sea. Now, ancient Greece is on the proper European continent. And then after this, we go to the Italian peninsula when we look at Etruscan and Roman art. And I do want to say that in a lot of this, if you take a look at the dates on some of these artworks and artifacts that we've seen, you'll see there's a lot of time overlap, and so a lot of things that were happening in Mesopotamia were occurring concurrently with what was going on in Egypt. And so we get these kind of spurts forward in time and spurts back. And so this chapter kind of begins roughly around 800 or so BCE. And so what we were looking at last week was this area. And what we're going to look at now is this area. You can see my little arrow. And so it's the Greek world. And so I said 800. This is, you'll find this too. Bottom line, these dates are a little bit soft, if you know what I mean. Like I typically think of the Greek world and the Greek era as starting around 800 BCE. And I got this off a slide from somewhere on the internet, and please don't turn me in. I don't want to get a unauthorized use of this slide notice, but anyway, I thought it was pretty good. It was off of somebody else's presentation. And what we have here, this starts at 900 to 700 BCE, and then we have 700 to 500, which is the Archaic period, then the Classical period, and then the Hellenistic period. So what we're talking about is really about 900 years. And Hellenistic period actually runs all the way up to and through the beginning of the Roman Empire. And so, geometric art. Now this is not particularly geometric art. This is a slide that I couldn't get off of that slide I stole. But basically, here's what happens. The Greek city-states, polis, was formed. The Greek alphabet was developed. And we talked about that a little bit last week about how the Phoenicians were really the ones that kind of developed an alphabet that had characters to describe sounds, not pictures to denote things. And so, Victor, we're glad you're here. Bottom line, here's what we have. We have a Greek alphabet that emerges out of all of this. And as I said last week, alphabet is actually named for the first two letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha and beta. And so anyway, this idea of a city-state polis. What? We still use that today. You think? You seen that term tacked on the end of a city's name? Like Indianapolis, Minneapolis. How about Superman fans? Metropolis, you say. Anyway, so a lot of this stuff we're going to find throughout this whole chapter. This stuff even more directly relates to the modern Western world. The things from Egypt, Mesopotamia, they kind of help establish the Greek state, but the Greek state emerges as something really entirely different. And it's really kind of an interesting story. And so they had the city-state and the Greek alphabet, and new opportunities for trade and colonization was realized. And that's why I made a point last time we were talking about Crete, just south of Greece proper, and their boats, the frescoes with all the boats and how they were trading back and forth with Egypt, but also trading along the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea, which would include modern day Israel, Lebanon, Syria, those countries through there, as well as Egypt. And so anyway, the Greeks constructed a lot of stuff. They were engineers, to be sure. And one of the differences between what we know about ancient Greek civilization and ancient Egyptian civilization is that the civilization didn't really go dormant for a long period of time. We didn't lose the language. Now there is Old Greek and New Greek languages, to be sure, but that was kind of a steady and almost uninterrupted culture. And so with that, we can tell a lot of things about what the culture was 3,000 years ago. And secondly, they had this, and I'm going to say this so much, the alphabet, the Greek alphabet, that implies history. Now we know they had writing in hieroglyphics in Egypt, and we know they had cuneiform writing in the Mesopotamian kingdoms, but this is like a modern language. And so even a lot of the stuff that they wrote, we got primary copies of what they did. And so even to the point where when we talk about the Parthenon, we know who designed it. And so on, we got the records. And so anyway, and so what they developed early was terracotta vases, casting, and cold working bronze. Casting. Anybody? Gus Fisher. Wrong kind of casting. What you got, Carter?
I thought it was like casting, blacksmith casting.
It is like blacksmith casting, and what you do with that is that you heat the metal, and bronze is basically copper and tin, but you mix it, you get the right amounts in there, and you heat it in a crucible. You ever heard the term crucible? That's where they heat this metal up, and they make it so hot that it's molten, it's liquid metal. And then they put it in a mold. They pour it in. That's casting. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but they really started doing that in a pretty big way, in a way that we haven't seen really so much before. Almost everything we've seen has been cut from stone. We've seen a lot of limestone and granite and other stones, marble. But bronze statues, this is where it comes from. And terracotta vases. What terracotta is. Did we talk about that yet? Terracotta. Anybody know? This is a Latin term, but it kind of filters through a lot of the Romantic languages. You know what the Romantic languages are? No. What are they? Yeah, they are the languages developed out of Latin. From the ancient Latin, which is the language the Romans used. That was their native language, was Latin. And so the three major languages that developed out of Latin was Italian, obviously, French, and Spanish. And so Spanish is what we call the Romantic, and that's put the parenthesis around Romantic, Roman languages. And so let's pull this another step further. This is why we call Mexico, Central America, South America, Latin America, because they all speak Romantic languages and mostly Spanish, but some Portuguese, and in some places French, actually. But that's Latin. That's where it comes from. So anyway, as I was saying, terra, and it comes from a Latin that means earth. Terracotta is basically clay. And so they found this clay that is really suitable for making things like this, vases and pottery and so on. And what they do there, and we're talking about furnaces and kilns and stuff here. They figured out how to fire this, put it in a kiln. It's superheated oven. And it makes it real hard. And you can paint these and put them in the kiln, and then the painting itself becomes bonded with the terracotta. So anyway, they were doing a lot of this stuff, and it says the only significant medium that had not yet evolved was that of monumental stone sculpture. They didn't get to it, but the Egyptians did. They were doing a lot of sandstone. Well, look at stuff like the Sphinx, for example. That's a large scale sculpture, but they didn't really do that so much, at least for a long time. The Archaic period, 700 to 500. And this is, it's the two main orders of Greek architecture, the Doric and the Ionic, were established. And they had black figure pottery. And that's what this is, black figure pottery. You can tell because it's predominantly black and it's painted with an orange, which is kind of a iron-based pigment, what we would call a glaze. They learned how to do that. They figured that out. And it says they developed a wealth of iconography. And that's really true too, because a lot of what we we mine, I mean, like actually dig up and use today, comes right out of Greek culture. So how about like things like this? How many of you had heard of the Apollo 11 mission? Everybody, yeah. Well, Apollo was a Greek god. See, we use these mythical Greek ideas a lot. I mean, still yet today. What's the rocket that they were trying to get it ready to go unmanned to the moon and then back home? I had it on the tip of my tongue. I can't think of it, but it was yet another Greek god. And so anyway, the classical period, 480 to 323, this kind of begins 480. That's where we see the Parthenon. Parthenon gets built. We see their architecture really come to a very distinct and very noteworthy style of architecture. It's the same kind of thing we were talking about. Raylan was talking about that. We were talking about official buildings and how some Egyptian stuff is incorporated. This is classical architecture. And as we go through this, you'll see that a lot of the stuff the Greeks made looks like official buildings in Washington, DC. The Doric, the Ionic columns, the pediments, the frieze, everything. Anyway, bottom line, the middle of the 5th century is also referred to as the golden age of Greek, particularly of Athens, and that's where the Parthenon is. That is really the great height of civilization. I want to kind of point out this too, and we talk about this. It says during mid-4th century, Macedonia became a formidable power under Philip II and the Royal Macedonian court. And Philip II's son was Alexander the Great. And so 323 BCE is the death of Alexander the Great. And that was like they're talking about the Queen of England right now, and it's the end of an era. This was truly the same thing that happened in ancient Greece. Everything changed upon his death. And so anyway, that's kind of the last part here is what happened afterwards, and it's 321 to 31. And why does it end at 31? Because the Roman Empire emerges. And by 31 BC, we already had Julius Caesar had come and gone. When was he killed? The 15th of March, 44 BCE, just saying the Ides of March. And so anyway, but they had a real change. The death of Alexander the Great traditionally marks the beginning of the Hellenistic period. And so this is kind of a whole different thing. And it says there are representations of unorthodox subjects, such as grotesque, and of more conventional inhabitants, such as children and elderly people. These images describe a diverse Hellenistic populace. And so this is kind of an interesting term, because all the way up until now, if you saw a statue or a painting of a figure, you would know that this figure was important. Was God, a king, a general that won battles, something But we start to see artists depict, and they call us unorthodox subjects, but basically they start making statues and they start painting actual real people. It's kind of an interesting thing. And so anyway. So we start off, this is slide 5-1, but this is really in the classical period. I put a star by it. We'll talk about the stars on Wednesday. Icatinos, I keep putting an extra vowel. He's the guy that designed it. This is like huge. And we know a lot of the calculations. We know the math. We actually think we know where the marble came from. And so this is it. It's the sort of the grandparent, if you will, of all classical architecture in the West. And so here, I want to kind of bring up a question. How many of you familiar with it? Good. You guys, I thought so. This is, if you don't know this, you probably haven't been exposed to ancient Greek culture. This is really the big, this is the number one with a bullet. And so look at all this stuff around here. And I'm not exactly sure when this photo was taken. But look at all that stuff flying around. Is it crazy? Actually, this place was blown up in the 17th century. The Greeks used it to store all of their ammunition. The Turkish warship pulled into the harbor, cannon shot, hit the Parthenon. See, this is on a big hill called the Acropolis. And they thought they were safe with all of their gunpowder and all their ammunition stored up there. But lucky hit, boom, just blew the place apart. And so, I was just thinking of something. Maybe this would be a good time. Where am I at? Oh. Well, I gotta find this thing now. Oh, here it is. It's up here. And this is what we want to share. Got it all set up. Hopefully, this is actually right from the Acropolis website. It's a major tourist attraction, but what it has here is kind of a walkthrough, and you get an idea of what they're doing to restore this place too. So uh-oh, I need to get some volume. How do you offer such low prices? Volumes. Hey, I gotta get this so you can hear it. So excuse me for being so this Well, it's got subtitles. At any rate, I want you to see it. The visual is more important than anything. So here's what they're doing. This is really kind of hooked in. They give everybody iPads, and you can point to different places on the Parthenon and see what it looked like originally. See, they all have their iPads there. So they visual in 3D virtual enhancement kind of things. And you see there are other buildings up here. That's the Acropolis. It's the hill where all of this is. And you will love it. And as it's India, United States, South Africa, people come from all over the world to see this. Australia, Hong Kong, I mean, you know. Yeah, and in a second here, they'll show you what, see, as it was constructed then. And so when they get to a place here where they focus on that. So yeah, this is what they think this looks like. This comes from the pediment frieze. It's that band underneath the roof. It's, if you were talking about post and lintel, it would be the lintel. And so, yeah. And another thing that they have here, order showing it. I'll get a good picture of it here for you. Want to show you this. See this? Scaffolding. All that stuff I showed you laying around, they're trying to put this back together. That's an ongoing project too. And so, yeah, in the center of this is the statue that they believe was in there. The statue of Athena. This was a temple to the goddess Athena, and that is the goddess for whom Athens is named. Athens, Greece, Athena. She is sort of the patron goddess of the city. And what I wanted to show you about that, and they kind of hinted at that a little bit so far, is that what we know about these ancient Greek sculptures is that they were painted. They weren't like the white shiny marble that we see them today. They were actually painted, and we know that from, we have better technology and better forensics today, and they actually study the surface of these old sculptures, and boom. See, and no longer here. Yeah, and some of the surrounding buildings here too, typically decorated like that. And see, all of the sculpture was painted. Yeah, we know it's good, you guys. Let's see the building and just say it. But like I say, this is on their tourism site, you know, and they're really, you know, trying to. Here they are. And you see there are a lot of buildings, some don't even exist in any shape or form now, but. So if any of you guys go over to Greece to see this, could you like buy an extra ticket? I'm a senior, but we get a reduced fare. Just saying, never been there. There it is. So let's get back. This. And. And make sure I got my share right. Yeah, that's what. So, anyway, I was talking about all this stuff lying around here. This is really quite a problem, as you might guess. They've been trying to put this back together, and it's more together now than you see in this photograph, and it says copyright 2020, so it's at least 2 years old. One of the problems they have with this, so you saw all those people coming to see this. Well, that's not really a new phenomenon. People have been coming to see the Parthenon forever. It's been quite a worldwide tourist attraction, but until recent times, what people would do is that they'd come up and visit, and they'd take maybe a little something lying around here and put it in their pocket as a souvenir. And so if you're talking about hundreds of years of people coming up here, you're going to be missing a lot of pieces, and they're finding that out in a pretty major way. And so here's one of the inner frieze depicting a cavalcade of Athenian citizens. Cavalcade. Whoa, that's a vocabulary word. You know what a cavalcade is? No. Well, it's again another root word. Anybody ever heard of the cavalry? Horseback soldiers? It has everything to do with people on horseback. And so it's a cavalcade. All these people are on horseback. That's what that refers to. And so it's Athenians during a religious fest. First depiction of a human event on a Greek temple. So this has a lot of first. Well, it's the beginning of the classical period. Here's a diagram of the different kinds of pottery the Greeks made, and they all have they all have a Greek name, and when you see these things like an amphora, hydria, crater, and so on. That's what that means. And so probably the biggest one is amphora. You'll see that a lot. And a volute crater or a calyx crater. And so, let's see. Crater for mixing wine and water. So you see that here, it's over there. These things were household goods. We pick them out today as art, but they decorated their household wares. And so anyway, they put a lot of things into it. One of the things that you'll see here, oh, there it is, amphora for storing liquids. And you see it has much smaller top, much smaller neck and lip. So you could cover it. This is to mix it, that's. And so anyway, this is what you did. Like today, you have wares. And so this is a geometric crater. Geometric, what am I talking about there? That's this period, 900 to 700. See, it fits. And so one of the early styles of Greek pottery art is this geometry. They call it the geometric period, and a lot of things are geometricized. See those patterns around the lip and the neck, these patterns, so on. It still depicts people, and it's still about a story that's typical of Greek pottery. But even the figures, to some extent, are geometricized. Triangular upper torso. Whoa, where did we see that before? Cycladic figures, showed you some of those tiny cycladic sculptures. The woman part.
I think I said it was beautiful.
I agree, it is beautiful. And all of these decisions in their own way are mostly made with aesthetics in mind. So the fact that you see that this is beautiful means that the artist actually succeeded in creating something of beauty. And beauty is, for all of this, kind of one of the characteristics, I choose. And so anyway, but you see geometric here. These are warriors here with their shields, kind of geometricized. But look at that. This is pretty complex geometry over many parts of it, would you say? And what you would see here is likely a dying warrior. And all of the people, the mourners and so on. But geometric crater from Dead Leon Cemetery. So again, the dead person, the mourners. This here. Have you guys been watching TV at all the last week? Oh, yeah, some know, yeah. Well, this is an ancient version of what has been on the TV for about 10 days now. The funeral of Queen Elizabeth II. So, Blake, is that what's been on TV?
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
people have been posting like madness, rip the queen.
yeah,
Which honestly, a lot of people were hyped and hoping that she was gonna make it to 100.
yeah, that's true. And the thing, yeah, I think the thing is that the Greeks honor their dead in the same way that we honor it still to this day. This is not, in its own way, it's not that much different. It's almost 4,000 years old. No, almost 3,000 years old. But you see the pomp, the circumstance, the tribute to their leader. There's the leader. Geometric diplon. I'm trying to say it too quick. Geometric painter, amphora with a mourning scene. And so we see some of that, and it's more from the cemetery. But you see, I can't zoom it in any bigger, but there is same thing. There's the dead person. Here are the mourners and the attendants. But this one is covered in much more geometric patterns. And that's what we call that geometric period. It's hero and centaur. Hercules and Nessos from Olympia. This is all still in question. And this is that cast bronze we were talking about just a little while ago. And so they figured out how to make this centaur. What in the heck is a centaur? Carter, what you got?
Half man, half horse.
That is exactly right. That's who this is. And it's kind of depicted in an interesting way in that the man is actually a full man with the horse coming out of his back. You'll see different depictions of that as we go through time. And usually this part of the figure is still a horse, but we see that this is the mythology. And Hercules, bottom line, Greek gods. And again, the hybrid, half human, half animal. Seen this, we've seen this a lot. Another geometric age statuette of a youth. And again, it's got some writing on its old Greek writing, and you see it's elongated and it's kind of geometricized. But bottom line, let me just throw this out. The Cycladic figures were very abstracted. And we're seeing a lot of that emerge in ancient Greek culture. From Rhodes, this is a really beautiful vase. It's got animals, it's got a lion, got a swan, got a bull, got another lion, so on. And so this is like late geometric, and I want to kind of point out something here, that although these are depictions of animals, the geometric patterns are also very important here. So this is a lentil. I'm going to talk about post and lentil, two posts and a lentil going over the top of the doorway. That's what this is. We think from circa 625 BCE, but this is one that actually got displaced. And that happens a lot. So I was saying about the Parthenon, people picking up souvenirs. A lot of times invaders, they will come in and take
everything. Lady of Auxerre, Crete. So we got that Crete connection. Still want to point this out. Does this look Egyptian to you?
Yes, it does.
It does. It's kind of stiff. It's kind of has all of the hair, the kind of the stoicism. Yeah. And so in Egypt, Greece, the Aegean, they all kind of blend in. I'm wondering what is going on with this limestone. I don't think I put that arrow in. Anyway, I like it. It is limestone. And poros. You'll see this word a lot. Poros means young boy. And this is the archaic period of Greek art, 600 BCE. And I'll go back to the archaic here. And they actually show this particular koros. And the koros, what that means is a young man. That's the Greek term. And we'll see a number of sculptures. But we were talking just a moment ago about this and how that looked Egyptian. This is very Egyptian as well. Don't you think? It's actually the arms straight down. One of the things about the Egyptian sculpture is that they tended, if a person was a royal person, pharaoh or somebody important, they would always put one foot in front of the other. And that meant that this person was moving forward. And so, yeah, the muscles, the toes, we talk about the hair, it's all here. And so, half barrel, still kind of the archaic period, but you start to see some things change. A little bit more what I would call naturalism. And you see here, like, you see the muscle structure, but on this, hey, this guy's got a six-pack. And you can see some of the muscles and the veins in the arms. So this is kind of moving towards that big question I've been asking you guys a lot. This is more natural than, say, this. I don't think it's entirely natural. I think there's some things that look a little stiff, but bottom line, you can see he's carrying the weight. The weight seems to rest on his shoulders, half bare Kroisos. And this, yeah, this is the mid ground between the Egyptian and what we'll see later in Greece. A little bit more naturalism. Compare this one to this one. More natural. And that's really what the that's what the Greece, I'm tripping over my tongue, sorry. That's what the Greeks were really interested in, was this kind of naturalism. And they started to kind of form some beliefs about that. They're kind of aesthetic beliefs. And in fact, aesthetics is from a Greek word. Whoa, study of beauty. Whoa. Yeah, this whole idea and the idea of being so natural that how should I say this? A lot of cultures never even considered trying to make things this lifelike. Wasn't important. The symbolism was very important. The idea that you could recognize who these figures are and what they're doing, important, but the details, nah, not so much. And so here, this is what, these are what they call the Ramses twins, and this is Egyptian and so, yeah, that idea of putting one foot in front of the other, arms straight down. Yeah, except this is starting to get a little more natural. And probably a lot more like this. Kore. Told you Koros, that means young man. Kore, guess what that is? Young. Yes, young female, young woman. And so anyway, you see, it's still borrowing. Of course, this is 530. This is on the eve of the classical period, but they still have like, pardon the expression, they still have one foot in the Egyptian style. And all of that changes. Here's an interesting one. Korean and Ionian dress from Athens. Now look at this. This is where we're starting to get classical. This is where we're starting to even push that reality a little higher. Now, what about this statue? As much as it's broken, this is just a mere fragment. What is more natural about this? Emma, you got you want the fabric. That's the right guess, or at least that's how I see it too. The fabric, look at this. Look at how that drapes over the skin around her arm and hangs down. It's got the folds. To make that, especially try to carve something like that out of marble. Want to put a little aside here. In the 15th century, in Europe, especially in Italy, we have this period known as the Renaissance. And what was happening at the time was that these Italians were finding all kinds of statues like this and some of the ones that we'll see here. They started discovering classical Greek styles. And so this is the kind of sculpture that inspired the great sculptors of the Renaissance, like Michelangelo. And in fact, they looked at this and they were like inspired, and they studied their techniques. And so anyway, but that's why the Renaissance was named Renaissance, which means rebirth, a rebirth of the classical style. And so this is a typical Greek peripheral temple, and you see it basically a rectangle and columns around the exterior, and then inside you have this chamber. And when I showed you the Parthenon, where the statue of Athena was in this, in the cella. And here are the two orders of Greek architecture: the Doric, the Ionic. The Doric is what the Parthenon was done, and what they have here is this whole thing under the cornice is called a frieze, but this is called this is a metope, and this is just a frieze. And the metope just actually breaks up the surface. But the main difference between these two is this: the capital. And if you want to know what the order of a Greek architecture, Greek, ancient Greek building, or even a modern neoclassical building. You look at this, and the Doric order is flat, unadorned. The Ionic order has this scroll on the capital. The column itself on the Doric, these grooves in here, that's called fluting, but these have sharp edges. This has been cut down. Fluting's there, but the sharp edges have been. And so anyway, just NYI, FYI, anyway, here's a sample of the Doric order. And so you see, just straight, unadorned, period. And here's the floor plan. I'm gonna skip this one because I want to show you. Get back to the pottery here. There's that Doric, Ionic, and this is the third one. This isn't get developed until actually the Romans get involved, and that is that the capital of this, it's not straight and flat, it's not the scroll, it's floral. Just say it. And so another Doric, Doric. And so anyway, look at this. This is what those temples look like originally. As I was showing you with Parthenon, a lot of the stuff was painted. And to be sure, this is what this would have been painted like. And what you have up here are sculptures, battle scene, and it's painted somewhat. But this whole triangle is called the pediment. And the pediment sculptures are designed to fit in that triangle. You see on the ends, the figures are laying down. It's likely wounded or dying warriors, and you see the god or goddess here in the middle, and the warriors fighting it out. And that's really pretty much what it would look like. And this is what a dying warrior would look like. One of those sculptures like here. And so one of the things I wanted to kind of, what time? Oh, I know what I want to do. I want to end this or finish this up today because we're getting right into the classical period. It's too late to kind of start digging in there, but I do want to show you, we're getting right up to the 460 BCE. And what did I say? The classical period started 480. So this is actually early classical Greek architecture. There we go. And so I want to finish up with this. How this architecture influenced a lot of things over time. And so here we go. This is Monticello. What is Monticello? It's on the back of the nickel, just saying. It's Thomas Jefferson's home, and he designed it. And a lot of these guys, these men who are referred to as the founding fathers of the United States, of the US Republic, they were interested in classical ideas. Greek and Rome. They thought this was the height of Western civilization, and they try to emulate that as much as possible. And so what we have here, this is the rotunda, and this dome. This dome comes out of Roman architecture. This front portico comes out of ancient Greece. And you see here, Corinthian order. It's got the floral motif on the capital, on the tops of the columns. And so there's Monticello. That's what I should have said. The rotunda of UV. This is what's on the back of the nickel. This thing has changed over time. In fact, Thomas Jefferson during his lifetime changed everything around a number of times, was constantly revising, but here it is. This is his house here. And you see the influence, and that comes, this is the Pantheon in Rome. And this is really some almost 500 years or so after what I've been showing you, but the Romans pick up the architectural style of the Greeks. And in fact, in some cases, it's almost seamless, just that it moved from Athens to Rome, but basically it's the same culture. And the Romans adopted Greek gods. They just named them Roman names. For example, Ares, it's a Greek god. Mars, the Roman god, same person. Cupid, Eros, etc. But at any rate, Jefferson Memorial, right out of this kind of architecture. The Romans were really big on making these triumphal arches wherever they went. And it was kind of a big proclamation. It was a memorial work of architecture. And this is the Arch of Titus from Rome from 81 Common Era. In Paris, they made the Arch of Triumph, which is what that means, in 1836. So they're building things, almost 2,000 years later, based on classical architecture. This time, by the way, in Paris and the stuff in Virginia, that was all called neoclassical, by the way. A revival style of what they were finding all over, left from the Romans and the Greeks. And it still serves the same purpose. When the Nazis invaded France in 1940, what did? They put a parade right through the Arc of Triomphe, the Arch of Triumph. And so when the American troops came in and drove the Nazis out, what do? They march through the Arc de Triomphe too, you say. Trajan's Column in Rome, have this column, almost an exact copy in Paris, 1811. And I showed you some of this before about the Egyptian obelisk, the Washington Monument, neoclassical, neo-Egyptian. And I got this, it says pagan Egyptian obelisk. I tried to scrub that, I couldn't cut this off. Pagan's like a real derogatory term. It's not used much anymore, but it means non-Christian or pre-Christian. And the fact that this is still referred to as a pagan Egyptian obelisk, when they wanted to build this Washington Memorial in the late 19th century, there was substantial opposition to building an obelisk in Washington DC because it wasn't Greek and Roman. And so therefore it was pagan and they were, it was something of a scandal. We still have people objecting to things today. Everybody trying to make something political out of everything, but you see who won the day. And mostly when you see novels, especially in the US, you think Washington. So, okay, this is the east end of the Parthenon. Here's the scaffolding and stuff. And here are the tourists all over the grounds. I don't see any iPads in their hands, so. But this, the Lincoln Memorial, what does that look like? Looks like the Parthenon. Chamber of Commerce building in Athens, Georgia. Two things here. One is we named a lot of places in America after ancient sites, ancient cities, and sometimes ancient people. For example, Athens, Georgia, named right after Athens in Greece. But how about us? Go up here past Wentzville. Where do you go to? Troy, Missouri. Ancient Greek, Turkish city of Lisbon. How about Hannibal, sir? Hannibal was a general from Carthage and he attacked Rome successfully. He was a great warrior. Hannibal, Missouri. So anyway, just saying, but this is the Ionic order. And this was built in 1917. So we say. This is my old school Kirk Memorial. And you see a lot of places on campuses, not so much here. This architectural style is 20th century for sure. But 20th and 21st century and much more modern. But in a lot of academic institutions, you'll find this official neoclassical architecture. And how many of you ever been to Mizzou? Some, they have 4 columns up right in front. It signifies their connection to the ancients. And so I think that's a good place to stop. Any questions? Comments? See, I got a plexiglass here, so you guys don't like when I start throwing tomatoes. I'm covered. All right, so enjoy yourself. I know it's hot outside. It's our last blast of summer, I hope. Cross our fingers. You got it.
Professor?
Yes, Mackenzie.
Yeah,
Oh, you're here.
yeah. I was a little late to class. I was helping my parents move and I lost track
Okay,
of
I'm
time.
glad you spoke up because I gotta check out my attendance and Victor came in.
So
Yeah.
in high school, my friend, we had a pottery lesson. And she was on the wheel and we did it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Wow. Wow, where'd you go to high school?
Not Foster, it's a great.
That's like Scotland, right?
Was, you know where you see it, universities and things are like Lawrenceburg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's right over there.
Oh.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, but she like did her study on Greek art and that's what she made, and it reminded me of this.
That is, yeah, she did a good job
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
awesome.
awesome.
Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Have a good day.
You too. You too.
I wanted to ask you or talk to you about Wednesday. I actually had an interview with a design firm in Quebec. And so I was wondering if I could join on Zoom.
Yes.
I'm in Quebec. But
Speak French.
no,
Oh.
I'm not going to Quebec, but I have it, it's in, they have like